Good evening, friends. Just 1 hour late today. My apologies. Very, very busy weekend. Stephen Manning here, Integrity Ireland, S.O.S, Stephen on Sunday, or Sense on Sunday, hopefully. And today's talk, as you can see, is the democracy deception, ambitious autocrats, and the great political scam. And we have tonight probably around, well, we've got a good number of slides to get through, so I'll be speeding along this evening. By all means, feel free to freeze the frames at any given point and come back to them if you want to read them in further depth. But as I always do, my friends, is everything that I'm doing lately is in context of this notion called the original principle. And I'm putting up materials in various places online about this. If I may dare say so, I think this could be one of the keys to understanding the nature of human society, the nature of good and evil, how to get on the right side of those two choices, and basically the reason that we have things like religion, education, politics, and everything, and which elements are right and which elements are wrong. So if anyone's curious, that's my son Danny in the background there, just over the corner. He'll probably wave and say hello during the presentation. So let's get flying then today, guys. I'm going to start with a commentary. In Ireland, there's something going on. There's a move by politicians to try and ban the use of the Irish flag. Don't fall for it, friends. It's all about symbolism. I've said this before, we won't be dealing with this topic in particular here today, but they're trying to assign far-right usage to the national tricolour, and many of our ancestors in the not-so-distant past spilled their own blood to gain independence for Ireland, or so-called independence. That's another story for another day. Symbolism is hugely important. Hardly anybody understands this. But if I summarize it like this, guys, before bad actors, the truly wicked people in society, particularly the ones that would be, for example, Satanists or Lucifer worshippers, which many of our elites, so-called elites, are, the people in positions of power and authority, they have to symbolically demonstrate what they're going to do before they do it. Now, the recent example I can give you of this is, how can I say it without offending a whole bulk of Irish society currently, but let's just say a lot of the newly arrived migrants of a particular religious persuasion, not only in Ireland but in other countries, have started taking to praying in the streets, stopping traffic, taking over sports grounds, things of this nature. It's a symbolic demonstration of an intention to take over a culture. I'll leave it at that, guys. I'm making reference now to the attempts by politicians and councillors and so on to try and outlaw the showing and the displaying of the Irish national flag on the grounds that it's some sort of far-right symbol. Not at all. Don't buy into it, guys. By the end of this presentation, I think you'll understand fully why I'm making that point. Okay, so let's fly into this, guys. Now, good evening to those of you who are watching already. Obviously, this will be up on YouTube, Facebook, a few other locations, Rumble. I back up everything up to Rumble because they are very strong on no censorship. I just want to show you here, guys. I'm just going to fly through this, just making a quick point. Let's pull it up again. So sorry. Yes, recently, now what happens when I do these videos, StreamYard, the platform I'm on, automatically generates little TikTok type, short snippets. Some of them are good, some of them are pointless, and I just fire them up, and I keep getting these warnings, and it's invariably if Donald Trump is mentioned as one, as one reason they'll take it down. This one here was radical Islam, a socio-political movement, or true religion. Now, I was going to play it. I'm not going to play it again for you today, guys. But in this case, they blocked it, and I went in and said to them, please stop blocking on my stuff without even looking at it. So it's obviously being triggered by algorithms or words like Islam, I would imagine, is probably one of the words, and they just automatically block it. Anyway, that one got restored. The one about Trump didn't. I think there was another one here. Oh, yes. Australian political puppetry, the fruits of ignorance and virtue signaling. Sometimes the titles are generated by AI, I suppose. Sometimes I can amend them if I need to. This one too, because it challenged, the sort of mainstream narrative, But the point I'm trying to explain, and here's another one, are sociopaths in charge of our children's education? It's a very reasonable thing to ask. Again, I'm not going to run the reels today, guys, because we've got a lot to get through. Maybe one day I'll get all the prohibited ones and just run them through one after the other, just to prove a point. You're not going to silence me. If platforms get shut down, get removed, well, we'll just do what we can. If needs be, you stand out on the street corners like the Hold the Line people, and you say what has to be said. But to be silent in the face of this tyranny, guys, is, it's an abhorrent position to take. So we're going to start with one of my more familiar slides. And the point I'm making today, remember now the title is Democracy, the Deceptions of the Government, and so on. And I want to make this point here, guys, that this is what I call the diabolical structure. Now, because I don't want to keep repeating too much stuff every week, I'll put it very simply like this. We'll use the model, the notion of the Garden of Eden, when everything was perfect, all right? There was a time when everything was perfect. And there's a few interesting questions to posit, as far as we know, because there's limited data on what it was like. As far as we know, there was no religion there. There were no governments there. There were no legalities, legalisms and that sort of stuff. None of that was in existence. So we can naturally conclude that all of these institutions and constructs are, in one way or another, a consequence of what is known as the fall, our fall from grace, our tumbling into ignorance, our descent into sin, and all that sort of stuff. Then there's the reported fact that it was actually Cain, after he murdered his brother, he went off and set up the first city in the land of Nod. He called it Enoch, the name of the city, and it's in modern day Iran. Now, I've done other presentations about the symbolism, my friends, and explained to people how there's direct symbolic connections between the Cain and Abel story coming right down through history, through Ishmael and Isaac, the sons of Abraham, and from them to Jesus and the Prophet Muhammad and the conflicts in the Middle East. It's really worth looking into, guys. If you find that topic interesting, just go back through the videos and you'll find it, guys. I've done 2 or 3 now on that subject material alone. But to come back to this, why? I mean, we're all stuck in these pyramidal structures, are we not? Whether it's governments, whether it's corporations, whether it's the education system, whether it's the financial system, that we're all trapped in. We're required to act in a certain way in order to maintain our position in these systems. And the problem with that, my friends, is that the first thing that we're asked to surrender when we join a big corporation or when we go along with government diktats that we may not agree with is we're actually being forced to surrender our conscience. All right. Now, I'll make this a little bigger for a minute. So very simply, because we repeat this theme today, the first point I want you to notice is that the government or the boss at the top there, it's likely that the people sitting at the top of governance or in large corporations are in the sociopathic and psychopathic bracket of humanity. All right. Again, I'm trying to keep it reasonably straightforward and clear. There's a general difference between sociopathic behavior and empathetic behavior. We all know what an empath is. It's a kind person who feels in their heart when someone else is hurt or wounded, and they tend to be motivated then from that position. Sociopaths and psychopaths do not have this element in varying different degrees. The psychopaths are the clinical psychopaths. They don't have any empathy at all. Sociopaths, of course, could be on a learning curve. Depending on the work they're doing, the employment they're in, the way they were brought up, they can be trained to become sociopaths. But ultimately, when you're a full-blown sociopath, you can do shocking, awful, horrible things to other people and get, not be troubled at all by it, because basically you've given away your soul, your conscience, all right? So this model here is to explain to people that this basically, and today we're talking mainly about governments, right? Basically, how do you climb the ladder in an organization, let's say like the civil service or in politics? Well, the answer is there on the left of the pyramid. Through ambition, greed, service to the system or the organization, you get promoted. You know, people like we're going to talk about today, Simon Harris, Micheál Martin, this is how they clambered and scurried and scrambled their way to the top. They were seen to be valuable to the system, and in return got rewarded, so that they're now in a position where they now make diktats and orders. Then on the right-hand side, there's the motivation at the top. Money, power, prestige, greed, and profit via domination, oppression, exploitation, lies, injustice, or whatever. Okay. Then in the middle, the blue there, that equates to the plans: concept, plan, action, spirit, mind, body. Yeah, deity, feminine, masculine, in that order. This is the original principle, top right. This is the perverse form of it, where the concept is diabolical to start with, okay? Then they have to have an army of organized and institutionalized administrative and bureaucratic systems to achieve unpublicized objectives via mass deception, public relations, and social conditioning. And there you have all your administrators and your bureaucrats serving the boss. Yes, sir. No, sir. No, sir. Just doing my job. And then finally at the bottom, you've got the employees, the consumers, customers, or the public, whatever it might be, obedient lackeys, sycophants or sycophants, and servile employees, trapped in fear, ignorance, and or convenience, and or misplaced loyalties. Okay, because the values of these perverse systems are not openly declared. It's all under a veil of secrecy and deception. And therefore, you often find that people employed in these units are themselves largely kept in the dark. They're just told, do your job, you get your pay packet, over and done with. And again, I say we've got a lot to do today, guys, so I'm going to fly through these, come back and freeze them if you want to. And, excuse me. 3 necessities for evil and 3 necessities for good. Now, please look again at this, guys, all right? I'm making the contrast, a very simple contrast between a pure human being or a true human being, right, who is governed by good values there on the right-hand side, okay? The concept, the plan, and the action, it's all good, and the outcome is good, all right? The difficulty is, of course, if you're trapped in one of these systems. You want to do what's right, but you got to pay the bills, you know? You want to do it right, what's right, but you don't want to lose your passport. You want to do what's right, but you don't want to be confined to your house, you know? So you go along and you take the jab, for example, and so on and so forth. And it's in these moments where we are challenged to do the moral right thing that we often dismiss it and think, oh, well, you just weigh it up quickly. What's more important? Having an argument with the manager today and or getting a promotion in 3 months' time. And in a split-second decision, instead of having the moral argument that your conscience is telling you to have, you silence it and you drift another few inches up the sociopathic scale. And maybe if you're, quote, fortunate, you then get rewarded with the promotion because you've been a good little boy or girl, a good little toady or lackey. And again, I'm not trying to offend people here. And this is about education, my friends. I hope everybody's understanding. Until we understand what the real problem is, we can never possibly start to get the concept of how to plan to fix it. Okay, the concept, the plan, and the action. So very simply here, you see the man and the woman there on the right. The spirit, the mind, and the body is symbolized by the white, the blue, and the red. There's a reason for this. It aligns with the properties of light itself. It's in mythology. It's in scripture. It's in the structure of the atom. It's in the flags of the world. It's incredible, guys. It's a phenomenon that I discovered, well, it must be nearly 30 years ago. And I'm doing my best now to package it in a way that people can get it. They can understand it, because coming from this viewpoint of the original principle, I truly see and understand the evil and the wickedness in human structures in particular. And I'm starting to work out how it is we can undo those structures. But first of all, we're going to have a lot of people that understand this stuff, okay? So there on the left, there's all the vices that drive the inhumane values, but the 3 necessities for evil, right? For large-scale evil. Number 1, the urge to dominate, which is, as I say, sociopathic behavior. Why? Because empaths generally, right, empathetic people, ordinary or normal people, they actually run on things like love and affection and appreciation, but the main driving force for the best amongst us is love. And you could even say agape love, which is this form of unconditional love. If you can reach that level, that is its own reward, right? Sociopaths and psychopaths are not driven like that. They're driven by power, prestige, and possessions, by greed, ambition, and all that sort of stuff that's listed there, which you can, of course, freeze and look at again for yourself, you know? And then they force other people to align with them in order to maintain their position of power and control, which is their substitute for love and affection. All right. Money, power, control. That's why we see so many sad and unhappy lives and suicides, even amongst people who are supposedly immensely successful. It's because love is missing from their lives. Okay. And they are the three necessities. So the three necessities: the urge to dominate, the means to dominate. Now, in order to dominate, you need to have a structure, guys, short of just being the biggest guy in the room, you know, and with a big stick. You know, short of that, you need to have these diabolical structures, or else you cannot dominate and control other human beings. All right. And given what's happening around the world today, we need to understand this. All right. And then finally, there are material rewards for that domination. All right. In the form of, you know, money, power, as we say, prestige, promotions, notoriety, celebrity, whatever it might be, you know, getting your face on the cameras all the time, you know, the big I am, looking in the mirror at night, and there's no love in their lives. All right. But that's what we're up against. I'm making this generalization between good and evil. There's a lot of us that drift in and out of the gray areas on both sides of the scale here, you know, at different times in our lives and at different times in our daily lives even. And we're not aware of it. This is what I'm trying to help people to understand. And then over on the right, the three necessities for good. First of all, the urge to nurture, which, as I just said, is empathetic behavior. Secondly, an individual decision to nurture. So you don't need loads of structures. As a matter of fact, there's a problem. If you, let's say you want to set up a charity and you decide to set up a somewhat autocratic structure to advance the ideals of the charity, you've lost already, guys. Because the very structure, if it's large, the very structure will undermine itself. It will compromise itself, because you'll get people joining that structure who don't have the same motivations, and who join in order to just do their jobs, just to get the pay packet and all the rest of it. And the original ethos gets lost. It's always best to stay with small, discrete groups or individual actors, you know. And thirdly, the nurturing act is its own reward. So on one side, you get rewarded with money and power and prestige. On the other side, the reward is a sense of satisfaction that you've done the right thing. Yeah, correct. Okay, we'll fly through, guys. I'm going to watch the time here. I'm going to really fly. Here's another slide. I'll pull it up here for you. The same sort of notion, guys. The difference between authoritarian systems and collaborative systems. Now, don't forget, democracy is supposed to be a collaborative system. I hope to prove to you today that it isn't, not the way that it's being operated, okay? So authoritarian systems such as tyranny, dictatorship, fascism, despotism, autocracies, communism, totalitarianism, imperialism, colonialism, monarchism, government departments, corporate structure, and organized crime, okay? The system comes first. It has no conscience. It's only individual human beings that have consciences. That's why when your moral center, your moral compass says to you, do something or don't do something, you should listen to it, guys. Okay? We should be listening to it. And it doesn't matter who the head honcho is, the Simon Harrises and Micheál Martins of this world, who tell us what we can and can't do. You know, our reaction to that should be to say, sorry, buddy, that there's a conflict here between what my conscience is telling me and what you're telling me. And from what I'm learning, you're most likely to be a greedy, devious sociopath or psychopath. Why not? Why on earth would I respond to what you're telling me? I'll just slide Danny out there so he's not a distraction. But of course, most of us balk when the time comes to make that decision. And we're going to come to that in a second, guys. And there's the inverse of the original principle at the top. You see the top right here, spirit is the white, feminine is the blue, masculine is the red, but human history has been almost the reverse of that. The spirit is missing, meaning the godly function, and it's been replaced by a satanic function, and that then empowers the masculine to dominate the feminine, okay? And that is the story of human history. I know I'm going fast today, guys, but you can always freeze them and go back. And but I'm trying to make a good point here today. So there was a book written in 1577 called The Discourse on Voluntary Servitude. You can get it online, guys, for about $5. Honestly, it's a cheap little pamphlet. There's many versions of it now. It was an essay written by a judge of the French court, believe it or not, and he was only in his early 20s or something like that. Now, I'm not going to go into this too much today, other than to say he came up with 3 categories of people, this guy. And it's still used today, as you can see. Why do people willingly submit their authority? What is your authority? Well, I'm saying your authority comes from above. That's what sovereignty means. It comes from a source that is unchallengeable. That's what sovereignty means. And that sovereignty, whatever name you might give to it, the source, the deity, God, the origin, whatever you want to call it, But we submit to these worldly authorities who have all been set up by the archetypal Cain, reflecting the satanic mindset. All right. And without thinking about it, we're just born into these systems. It's not really our fault, if you know what I mean, guys. It's not our fault. We didn't know any better. Our parents didn't know any better. Almost no humans in history knew any better, except for a few rare saints, sages, messiahs, and so on. Right. But once we understand, this is what this is all about. Once we understand what evil really is, then it's much clearer to say, I want no part of it, hopefully. All right. But many of us are locked into these systems without understanding. So anyway, the point this guy made in this, and it was just an essay. It's not very big, actually, at all, 30 odd pages, an essay. But he actually explains in it that there are basically 3 types of people. The first are the knaves, old-fashioned English word for unscrupulous, devious, pirates, parasites, plunderers, and he describes them as the people who know that a position in government is going to keep them in clover, in gravy for the rest of their lives, and they work actively to convince the general public, which he describes as the fools, into believing that they're absolutely necessary, that governance is necessary, right? And the fools, who he describes as being something like 95% of the population or something, are the general public who, if I can remember the quote, believe that they are free because they are given one vote in millions about which despot or tyrant will rule over them for the next few years. Worth listening about, guys. And as the top there, you can see I said, and the third category is, well, I suppose the closest we'd have it today. He doesn't name it, interesting enough. He names a third category who he says, these are the people who know what's going on. They can see what's going on. But then he adds this clause. He said, but they lack the courage to make the necessary sacrifices to bring about the change that is necessary. Now, isn't that interesting? And at some point back, I realized, oh my Lord, this is the category that I fall in. I can see what's going on. I can even now explain it to most people. This was written over 500 years ago, guys, and we still haven't got it. Yeah, even though it's the center point of a lot of tracts, political thinking, and activism, and all that sort of stuff, even taught in courses. We still haven't got it. Which one of these 3 groups do I want to see myself in when I look in the mirror at night? Well, obviously, I don't want to see myself as a knave, someone who's taking advantage of other people through deception in order to give me a cozy career. And somehow it doesn't bother me when I look in the mirror at night, or I say my prayers, or whatever it might be. Yeah, that's sociopathic thinking, guys. And I'm sorry to say it, but what I'm saying is that nearly all of the people in middle or senior positions in large corporations or in governance are way up on the sociopathic scale. They're certainly heading that way. You might get the occasional one who's an exception to the rule, and there will be some sort of an explanation for that. Someone like, for example, like Donald Trump, before anybody gets mad at me, he is a bit different because he didn't come up through the system the way a normal politician would, didn't get trained and conditioned to be a habitual liar and all that sort of stuff. Okay, I'm not saying he's perfect, all right, but he's very different, is he not? Yeah. So, you know, do I want to be a knave? Absolutely not. Do I want to be a fool? It's the easy option, isn't it? Ignorance is bliss. Because the third category that he's talking about are the people who understand what's going on, but he said they lack the courage to make the personal sacrifices necessary to bring about change. It's a very poignant point. And you say, well, what sort of sacrifices are you talking about? Crucifixion, maybe? Being burnt at the stake, maybe? Being outcast by your families, maybe? When you stand up against a false narrative, a medical narrative, you know, and so on and so forth. But the good news, I believe, and I think this is what's different now, literally in 2025, than it was in 1577 or at any time since. I believe that this third category, within which now I would say I would place people like whistleblowers, pro-justice activists, genuine researchers, people who have maintained their integrity in the professions despite all the pressure on them from the top of these pyramids to shut up and stop telling the truth. Now, there's not many of them. I heard only the other day, for example, there's only, out of, I think it was 60,000 pathologists in the whole world, there's only about a dozen of them around the world that are actively diagnosing, maybe it's the right word, or anyway, they're doing the examinations properly and explaining why there is such an awful rise in unexpected and unanticipated deaths. All right, we don't even have one of them in Ireland. The guy who was talking said he's aware of one in the USA. You know, we don't have a single one, not a single pathologist in Ireland who's doing these tests. It's appalling, guys. Yeah, because they're all locked into the system. They're all doing as they're told. They're thinking about their wage packet at the end of the week. The money that's been sent to them by big corporations, it's all, they're selling their souls. It's as simple as that, guys. But we've got to wake up to it. We've got to understand it so that we can be part of the solution. We're no longer supporting, promoting, funding, voting for these knaves. We're no longer the fools who believe that just because I have one vote in millions, that I'm free. Yeah, we become that 5%. We become the people, except instead of not having the courage, we do have the courage to act and to say and do something to make a difference. Okay, now let's see, fly on. So here we go, back to the categorizing of human evil. I'm just making a comparison quickly, guys, because I did this in previous weeks. There are three main types of human evil. There is initiative evil. These are the, let's call them again, the heads of government or the heads of major corporations. Now, again, I'm confining this away from the stupid psychopaths, because most of them do such stupid, outrageous things, you know, that they get caught or they get shot or they get taken out or they're in prison, you know what I mean, whatever it might be. So this is more to do with governance and corporations and so on. So you have the initiators of the evil at the top. They know what they're doing. It's deliberate, it's pre-planned, it's conscious, and they're profiting and getting rewarded from it, or perverse personal satisfaction. Then you have the next group. Now this equates again. Do you remember the previous slides, guys? The governments are the bosses at the top, the administrators and bureaucrats in the middle, and at the bottom, the often unwitting, you know, workers or the members of the public. Okay, so at the top, and then the facilitative, in the middle, facilitative with limited awareness by circumstance, association, obligation, compulsion, occupation, training, or duty, also for personal reward. So I'm saying those two categories are arguably the knaves. Okay, see the question mark jumped out there. The knaves by Leboth's descriptions. All right, and the third category would equate to the fools, unwitting, by circumstance, association, fear. Yeah, you will do this or else. Yeah, obligation, compulsion, conditioning, or ignorance, with or without personal reward. So some people will do it because it's just their jobs. Other people do it because they feel, you know, a certain even empathy towards a particular social situation, and they'll follow instructions and diktats without working it out for themselves, and they don't realize they're in this fool's category. Okay, all right. Now, obviously, the other 5%, the whistleblowers, the pro-justice activists, don't fall under this category of human evil, because they're the ones that are trying to change it. They're trying to do something about it. They're the good guys, my friends. All right. At the bottom here, evil is always instigated via human agency and always harms other humans. If the concept is not good, then the subsequent plans, actions, and outcome cannot possibly be good either. Now, again, I've done other slides about explaining to people natural disasters and all that. You can't describe them as evil. Evil is something that happens through human agency, only through human agency, and it always hurts other people, whether you're aware of it or not. Even as a fool, in the lowest category, if you're participating in evil, you will be damaging somebody else, whether you're visually aware of it or consciously aware of it or not. Evil is damaging other humans. Okay, so it needs to be understood. Anyway, we're flying along, guys. Let's see how we've got to get going quick. Right, now we get to the sort of the comedy parts here. Irish presidential election coming up. This is Justin. This is President Michael. Sorry, I got two concepts mixed up: Dustin the Turkey and Justin Trudeau. But here we are. No, Michael D. Higgins. He's the incumbent president of Ireland. He's done 2 7-year terms. He was basically anointed the second time round. I've always thought of him as a bit of a caricature. I've stuck in Dustin the Turkey there on the left. If you remember, we put him in for the Eurovision at a great affront to the rest of the European nations. And I think I'm glad to say, I think he came in dead last, you know, and a flipping puppet singing on the TV, competing against live performers. And it was in the height of the Celtic Tiger. We were sort of rubbing it in the noses of the Europeans, almost as bad as, what's her name, Bambi Thug, a couple of years back with the satanic rituals. Watch out, these guys. There's a lot of stuff going on in Ireland that needs to be paid attention to, right? Anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is, first of all, he's getting paid $250,000 a year. So in 14 years, he's made $3.5 million. That's just in wages alone. Never mind his expenses, packages, and all the rest of it, okay? It says here, citizens' information, the president is elected directly by the people of Ireland. Oh, really? Is that so? Let's see about that. Okay? He's elected directly by the people of Ireland, is he? Let's see. And there's a lot of colourful people at the moment in the running. We'll see what happens here. So there's a spending limit. So if you're a potential candidate, you can only spend $750,000. Ooh, it'd be nice. Be nice to be in the running, would it not? You know, €750,000 euros you can spend on your campaign. But the question I'm going to ask, right? Oh, and they said they can get back $250,000 of that from the state. All right, your first paycheck, basically, I suppose. Yeah. So it says each candidate's election agent must tell the Standards and Public Office Commission how much the candidate spent. You know what? There's another joke agency set up by the system to protect itself. I went to them. I won't go into the story now, guys. I went to them about election fraud in Castlebar and County Mayo, substantial election fraud twice in a row in 2 different elections. I had the proofs and everything. And it just everybody operated to shut down we went to the government with it, and they came up with a rule saying, oh, if we vote amongst ourselves, we can declare your documents, your evidence, to have ceased to have been an issue before the committee. And that's it. They just made it disappear into thin air. Unbelievable. So it says here, there's also strict limits on the value of donations to candidates, and each candidate's election agent must report details to SIPO. Okay, SIPO. At the bottom there are, in order from left to right, the size of the major political parties in Ireland at the moment. That's not all of them, but that's enough for now to prove a point. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, who are traditional opponents, supposedly, teamed up to block Sinn Féin, and they're playing swapsies with the leadership. At the moment, it's Micheál Martin and Simon Harris from Fine Gael. Look, they're all subject to these constructs, these autocratic constructs. I want to make this a point, guys, all right? So this is Micheál Martin talking. Look at the sincere look on this man's face, all right? He's talking about the presidential elections and a little bit of flack now. People are getting a bit upset about moves by the political parties. And he says, that's what the issue here is. It's about the presidency. The presidency doesn't belong to any political party, nor does any individual have an entitlement to the presidency. The Constitution is very clear. We've always tried to keep the presidency out of party politics, and I will continue to try and do that. Now, that was said just a couple of weeks ago. Today, I heard on RT News, Martin instructs Fianna Fáil councillors not to approve independent candidates. So they've set the system up so that you can only get on the ballot if you can get, I think it's 20 TDs to back you and or 4 county councils. Because they've the largest political party in Ireland, Fianna Fáil, they're telling their councillors, and I mean, remember now, the pyramid dictating downwards. I don't care what you, Mr. Individual Councillor, thinks, whether you're a decent man and you're trying to do the right thing for Ireland, you will bloody well do as we tell you to do. That is not democracy, my friends. That is autocracy, all right? It never was democracy, all right? Then we go to the next one. Here's Simon Harris, and I've just borrowed a quote here from Chris Fortner. Thank you, Chris. Hope you don't mind. It seems to sum it up nicely. Simon Harris tells all Fine Gael councillors, so that's the 3rd biggest party in Ireland, that under no circumstances are they to allow independent candidates onto the ballot for the presidential election. What's happened to our democracy, friends? In a directory sent out to all Fine Gael councillors, Simon Harris has told them that should any vote to nominate an independent candidate to appear on the ballot, that Fine Gael councillors are obligated to oppose the motion. This is an affront to democracy, says Chris, and he's quite right. This is an insult to the Constitution that Micheál Martin was just applauding a few minutes ago. And this is a flagrant act of tyranny by Hardman Harris. He's about as hard as a hollow pencil, I think. Councils and councillors should be free from their party whip to nominate a worthy independent to appear on the presidential ballot. And then he mentions Maria Steen. Maybe look at her next week. To prohibit others from appearing on the ballot is dictatorial, autocratic, tyrannical. Simon Harris is a disgrace to this country. Democracy is an illusion under Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Chris wrote this before Martin said what he said today on the news. I'm just making the point, guys. What is democracy? Right? And here we have, and I've just coloured this in. This is Micheál Martin talking again. We can't restrict the presidency to the wishes of an individual political party. In my view, any candidate you put forward has to have the capacity to command a broad support of as many people as possible. Look, we just heard the Citizens Information people tell us that the president is elected directly by the people. Why are these political parties getting involved? And one of the questions I meant to ask when we were talking about the money, right? They can only spend 750,000, only $750,000 on a program. But what's to stop Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael or Sinn Féin or any one of the others spending 10 times that amount to get their boy in, to keep the system nice and closed? The president is supposed to be a safeguard, excuse me, just like the mainstream media, against the abuses of political parties. Political parties are autocratically run. They are not democratic. We think because we're given that 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million choice, or 6 million, to choose whoever is the next party of political tyrant or patsy or toady and lackey, as you know, not to become a politician. And one of my logos was Stephen Manning, not a politician. But to sort of, you never know. You think, well, maybe if I could get in, I might be able to do something. But I now realize it's more or less a wasted, because the system is diabolical. I would be forced to conform to the structures of the system, to abide by the findings of NGOs that have been hired and paid for by taxpayers' money, by the government, to produce the result they want, to be subject to a president who's supposedly independent, who would be basically appointed or chosen or anointed by one of the main political parties. And then there's all the rules of court, so to speak, in the Dáil, where if you speak out of turn, you can be censured, silenced, blocked from speaking on the floor. Yeah? Guys, it's all a scam. It's a massive scam. Now, there are solutions. We have to know what to do about it. Right. Very quickly, because again, I'm watching the time, guys. What is a chief whip? Now, I've put a picture of a whip there. I actually thought, when I researched this, I thought I was going to find out that there was a day when there were some guys in the English Parliament, for example, literally whipping people if they didn't do as they were told. But it's the next best thing, all right? So the chief whip is a political leader whose task is to enforce the whipping system, which aims to ensure that legislators who are members of a political party attend and vote on legislation as the party leadership prescribes. Stuff your conscience, stuff your morality, if the party leadership, who are quite probably scheming, career liars or moral deviants, if the party leadership tell you to do it, you've got to do it. That's not democracy, my friends. They put the party interests come before the country, and then all their developer friends and their friends in the media, and they're giving their licenses off to their buddies, making millions, zillions and trillions out of it. And it's a nasty circle, The whipping system is a crucial component of modern politics, playing a vital role in maintaining party discipline and ensuring that members of a political party vote in line with party policies, right? Straight off the internet, guys. Nice and easy to see, okay? Now, I'm just making a point here. I'll just quote some of it. The historian and statesman Edward Hyde, Earl of Clarendon, this is way back, 1640s, later wrote about how a small group of members, this is parliamentary members, developed a sophisticated management operation to take control of the House of Commons. There's an intriguing passage in a pamphlet by the royalist polemicist Roger Lestrange, the Strange Roger, published 20 years later, in which he sketched out how a small faction could seize control of the House of Commons through a sophisticated team operation. The leaders of the faction, he explained, would assign different roles to their henchmen. You watch the term henchman, enforcement. The Presbyterian Walter Long, probably a very holy guy, must have had quite a few muscles though. It suggests that individual members were identified with particular jobs. This Longfellow was said to have stood close to the door of the chamber in order to bully potential supporters to remain until a vote was taken and to fetch them back if they had left without him noticing, for which he was dubbed the Parliament Driver. Where's the democracy here, guys, huh? And which became an item in the impeachment charges prepared against him and other Presbyterian leaders in 1647. I know it's going way back, guys, but I was hunting for the proofs that somebody, well, that was the next best thing, basically a physical bully, forcing people to do as they're told, rather than what the people want. Okay, do you understand, guys? Right? Which is all right if the leaders in the political party genuinely represent the people, but they don't. I've just explained this to you. The system is just diabolical. So, so again, about the chief whip, he also is appointed as parliamentary secretary to the Treasury, a cabinet position. All right. So the chief whip is on the cabinet. He's also assigned to the Treasury. There's the money coming in again, one of the chief driving factors of the diabolical construct, diabolical mindset. Okay, this book on the left, if you're interested, guys, go in and read it. It caught my attention because this is around, there was a debate in 1666 about excise taxes, right? Again, the driving influence is about stealing money from the population and giving it to the elites. It's really that simple. I think it was Julian Assange maybe, or Edward Snowden said it. The purpose of government is to transfer wealth from the population to the elites. All right, that's what it's about. So so let's keep flying here. So I just want to point out again, inside that book there, interestingly, part 2 is called The Devil's Remedy, right? Delusion, trust, credit, and the excise. It's about the development of, here we have in the middle, I think the way he says it here, this book traces the growth of customs and excise and their integral role in shaping the framework of industrial England, including state power, technical advance, and the evolution of consumer society. Central to this structure was the development of 2 economies, not one, guys, 2. One was legal and the other was illicit. All right, they're in it up to their elbows, guys. They've been at deceit for years. And the other point here at the bottom is the Sescovy Trust. If you know nothing about it, guys, this is a central tenet of the free man movement, I suppose you might say. But very simply, these were acts of parliament in 1666 after the Great Plague and the Fire of London that basically ruled everybody dead unless they went and lodged a paper and registered themselves as being alive. All right, the start of birth registration and all that. Another big part of the eternal scam that turns us all into corporations and so on. If you look up, for instance, Joe Ducey now online, JoeDoocey, you'll find he's quite an expert on this matter. But I've got to keep flying. I don't know that we're going to get it all done. Excise or excise tax is any duty on a category of goods that is normally levied by a government at the moment of manufacture for domestic consumption. This makes excise tax different from sales tax. Now here again, excise tax is sometimes also called a sin tax because it is on goods that are considered unhealthy, interestingly, alcohol, for example, and it produces billions of dollars in federal and state revenue each year. Excise tax paid mainly by consumers when demand happens to be price inelastic and supply is price elastic. The majority of the tax burden falls upon who? The consumer, the fools. And who's levying it? The knaves, the deviants at the top. Okay? I hope the point's coming through, guys. I'll keep pumping away. Oh, yes. Credit to the author of this. I'm sorry, I don't know who originally authored this. I was going to read it. I see it's over the inheritance tax. That's the last little bit. I won't read it out, guys, because you can freeze this and read it. I also changed, I think it was the third last verse, just a little bit because it read a bit awkwardly. No offense to the original author. I was going to read it all out, you know, but yeah, all of these taxes on the right, see them all? Okay. The next slide is probably more important. You know, tax, 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 tax. It's quite a clever little poem, you know. Still think this is funny? Again, this is a quote from somebody else, guys, you know. Not one of these taxes existed 100 years ago, and mum stayed home to raise the kids. What in the happened? Could it be the lying, parasitic politicians wasting our money? Oh, and don't forget the relatively new bank charges. And we all know what we think of bankers. I hope this goes around Aaron at least 1,000,000 times, I think he says, or 1,000 times. You can help it there. Is Michel Lemass, I think is the right way to say that. Sorry, guys, I left Ireland when I was quite young. Yeah, with respect. All right. So again, just to press home a point. And talking of bankers, just again, making a point. Who's this guy here? Max Warburg. Why is he important? Well, at the beginning of the First World War, just making a point here, guys, as you can see here, he was a German banker and a member of the prominent Warburg family. He advised Kaiser Wilhelm II, served on the Reichsbank board, and emigrated to the United States in 1938. The Reichsbank over there on the right was the central bank of the German Empire from 1876 until the end of Nazi Germany in 1945. Right, so a key financial player in funding and financing the First Reich and Nazi Germany. Fair enough? Got that? Okay, so what's the big point? Well, the big point, guys, is here's his brother, Paul Warburg. And who is he? He was the head of the Federal Reserve. That's the private banking system in America in 1917, the middle of the First World War. He was a key figure in the establishment of the Federal Reserve System. Warburg was part of a group of influential bankers, including his brother, who was funding the German side, who met at Jekyll Island, appropriately named, in 1910 to discuss reforms for the banking system, which laid the groundwork for the Federal Reserve. All schemers, guys, all being driven by sociopathic intentions, wicked, evil, ambitious men. Okay? All right? So their connection with the Rothschilds, again, the Federal Reserve, blah, blah, blah. Okay, look it up for yourself, guys. I just wanted to make the point. Who do the bankers serve? Yeah? And who are the politicians beholden to? Yeah? And on the Germans, I thought this was worth a quick look, guys. I think we're going to finish today in time, believe it or not. I did fly through a bit fast, but I think we're doing okay. The AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, you know, the Alternative Party. The Daily Examiner in New Zealand describes them as... are you all right, Danny? All right, son. A polarizing force in German politics and recently classified as a right-wing extremist group by who? The German government spy agency. All right. Now, the classification is paused because they've appealed against being called a right-wing extremist group because under that description, the government, of course, can outlaw them and prevent them from either running in the elections or holding office. Sorry, Danny. Danny seems to be having a sneezing fit back there. So the point here is, though, 7 of them have dropped dead in 2 weeks, just before elections. And there are, of course, the usual fact checkers out there now. Apparently one was an alleged suicide. The others were natural causes or whatever. It's incredible. So officials claim there is no evidence of foul play, citing natural causes, pre-existing health issues, or suicide. Which officials would this be? The same officials that told us to go and live in our homes for months, months, and to take experimental jibby-jabbies and so on and so forth. Yeah. However, the proximity of these deaths, 6 within 13 days, followed by a 7th shortly after, has fueled international suspicion. I'm suspicious. Of course, it could be a coincidence. But what a convenient coincidence for the diabolicals, for people with an evil agenda, that the AfD is challenging what the EU is trying to do in Germany. Yeah? And don't forget your man, I've forgotten his name already, spotted on the train sniffing cocaine with his buddies Starmer and Macron. Yeah? It's a joke, guys. It's a joke. Why wouldn't they do stuff like that when the cameras aren't there? Hiding the cocaine under the sleeves and all the rest of it. Yeah? And that's gone dead silent. The fade factor. Nobody knows what happened. Now, just a reminder, my friends, in my book, Crisis, Cull or Coup, how are we doing for time? Oh, we're doing okay. I don't know if I can read these from this distance here. I'll see if I can bring it up a little bit bigger. But they are top left. There are 2 main sections in the book, guys, and it sold really well. It was Amazon #1 in its category for certainly a few days at one point, and which I was very happy to see, because I put my heart and soul into this book. It's not only about the pandemic, guys. I've used the pandemic to explain the original principle, to explain how human society is intrinsically, in the institutions of human society are intrinsically evil, how and why this has happened, the history of money, and so on and so forth. And again, I made it very clear in the book that this was, yes, #1, it was a crisis. #2, yes, it was a cull. And #3, yes, it was a coup. All right. But of the 2 sections in the book, if you haven't read it yet, guys, if you want to support the work we're doing, this, as I keep saying to people, my first choice of anyone coming along to support what we're doing is, please buy the book, pass it on. Absolutely, read it, of course. Read the book, pass it on. The more people that understand this stuff, that's my personal sense of mission, is to get these educational materials out there. That's what gives me the most satisfaction. And of course, indirectly, then there's a little royalty comes from the books, and that helps us keep going. I'm not the begging type. I'm not the sort of guy who's going to demand that you click and subscribe and buy me a coffee or a bucket full of beer or whatever it might be, online. I'm hoping that if people see the value in what we're doing, that there'll be, and the greatest value is not that you buy these books. The greatest value is that you listen, and that the information filters in sufficiently to affect somebody else's thinking more towards the moral, good, true side, and less towards the sociopathic, devious, diabolical side. That's what we're aiming for here, guys. I'd take that any day. Certainly, I'd take it any day of the week over money. If somebody wrote me a check and said either that, or let's say, 10 more people who are listening to you today, Stephen, who've actually picked up something that's important. That's what I'm after, guys. Okay. But anyway, this the Great Lie was one of the 2 main sections. One was the truth about the COVID phenomenon, let's call it that, and the other was the Great Lie. And the Great Lie starts with top left, that governments work for the people. All right, that all people are equal under the law. These are lies, guys. That public servants work for the public, that democracy replaced tyranny, that political parties are not autocratic and self-serving, that we have a genuine separation of powers, that the authorities can be trusted, that we have the rule of law, etc., etc., that fascism has been defeated. All of this is proven in the book, guys. It's all proven. None of this, these are all lies, and most of us are stuck in that bottom section of this diabolical pyramid, where we think and believe we are free because we get a pay packet at the end of the week, and we're allowed to vote once every 7 years in this case, or once every 4 years. But they've filtered out basically anybody that could really get in there and do some damage to these diabolical systems, like they tried to do with Trump, for example, like they may be doing with the AfD. They've gone past the point now where they're just hiding it. I would be very surprised if we don't discover that at least some of those 7 deaths, all from the same political party. Some guy said, this is, when there was only 4 of them had died in about a week or 10 days or something. He said, this is statistically impossible. Now it's 7 of them, guys. And it's a political party that threatens to unseat the EU agenda in Germany. Yeah. We've got to be, I'm not, you see, I won't say definitively this is the evil so-and-so is, taking out the political opponents, because I don't know that. But it is highly, highly suspicious, and it would be highly convenient to the diabolical system for this to happen. There's 2 factors. Now we have to see if we can get some proofs. If there are enough professionals of integrity, medical professionals, legal professionals, and so on, who can do something. Do you remember Reinhard Fulmich, I think his name, Reinhard Fulmich, very brave lawyer, stood up to the system during the pandemic, yeah? And I'll have to check on him now and find out what happened, but he got shut down, cancelled, legal attacks on him and everything, okay? So if you have time, freeze that, blow it up, put it up big just for 2 seconds, and then we'll move to the next slide, and you can read it for yourself, guys. The last couple, I think that it's not up to me, and that there's no great lie. Okay, another 2 great lies. All right. So here we go. Who to listen to? I managed to get it in today. Who to listen to? I'm nominating today Russell Brand. Now, I don't necessarily agree with everything he says. I might have questions about some topics he doesn't talk about, but I found him to be very insightful. I'm encouraged by the fact that he's when I say a born-again Christian, he's found faith and seems to be driven by, he's driven now, and he admits freely to his past. They've come after him, of course. He's in court now, all sorts of accusations. It's the same pattern, guys. This is how they went after me at the beginning. It was sexually inappropriate allegations. I defeated them, but it took years, nearly caused flipping mental breakdown and all the rest of it. But it's the default reaction. The satanic camp default goes to sexual accusations. They did it with Julian Assange. Do you remember? Yeah. And this is their default because it hits right at the core of spirituality, believe it or not, the sexuality. Okay. So I'll just quote what he says here. Generally speaking, this is, he said a little while back, generally speaking, I think you're better off with President Trump than anyone who's going to emerge out of the Democrat Party, hands down. People are tired of polished politicians, career liars and moral deviants, I call them. And we're starting to see why. Many are blackmailed, compromised, and controlled. We should have made some reference to the whip being some of their nocturnal pastimes, I think, off the record. But anyway, so there you can find him on Rumble. He's not censored there. Rumble have been very brave, refused to kowtow to the pressure being put on them. And yes, I did have a little reel. I would have had time to play it, but I'll leave it perhaps to next week, guys. But again, just to reiterate, where do our rights come from? They come from God, or from your internal spiritual authority, which naturally has to be in alignment with the concepts of good, the empathetic concepts, compassion, kindness, love, care for your fellow man. All right. If your conscience is in line with those principles, you can call it God. Even if you're an atheist, you can call it God. Okay. All right. Our rights come from God, not government. And there's your diabolical pyramid again on the right. The 2 are opposite. And finally, this is our last slide, guys. If you want to follow us in different locations, these are some of the locations where you can find us. We're just coming up to the last minute. The man above me is a man called Jesse Hall. I mentioned him before. He too has been cancelled. He had thousands of videos of all sorts of interesting people, including myself, I might add, if you consider me interesting. He was very free and generous with his time. Gave me the opportunity to put some very important information out there in some very long videos. 1 or 2 went over 4 hours. Anyway, look up Jesse Hall. Please encourage him, guys, because he has been cancelled and he's trying to establish a foothold. Like all of us, we need your love and support and your encouragement. God bless everyone. I will answer the questions on Facebook and YouTube as I can. God bless everyone, and I will hopefully see you next week.